So, my name's Suzy Moat. I'm an Associate Professor of Behavioural Science at Warwick Business School. And I'm also a Fellow at the Alan Turing Institute, the UK's National Data Science Institute. Now, I know in the UK we're known for our terrible weather, but we also have some very beautiful locations. So this is a picture of the Lake District. Now, I grew up near the Lake District, and I used to really enjoy spending time there because it was beautiful. And being in this beautiful place just made me feel better. Now, these days, I have the huge honor of directing the Data Science Lab with my colleague Tobias Price at Warwick Business School. And here on the right, that's Chanuki Saracina. She's a doctoral researcher in our lab. But before she came to work with us, she used to run a design studio. So she's got a real sense of the potential impact of the way things look. Now, so Chanuki, Tobias, and I, we were looking at photographs like this, and we were wondering, is there not some way in which we can quantify the real relationship between the way places look and how well we feel? Now, luckily, a few years beforehand, a fantastic organization called My Society had created a game called Scenic or Not. Now, Scenic or Not shows you pictures like this, and it asks you to rate them. So if you think it's very scenic, you can give it 10. If you don't like it at all, you can give it 1. And these photographs, in turn, come from another website called Geograph. Now, Geograph is a game where you get points for uploading photographs in as many kilometer squares as possible in Great Britain. So on the back of Scenic or Not and Geograph, we have over 1.5 million ratings for over 200,000 locations in Great Britain. So we can plot this data, and it looks like this. So darker locations are areas that have been given higher ratings. So up in the north, that's the Lake District. That's basically everybody agreeing with me. But you can see down towards the southeast a lighter splodge as well, and that's London. And so we do see that on the whole, cities don't score as well. Now, every 10 years in the UK, we have a census. And one of the questions on the census asks people to rate their health. And so we wondered, what would happen if we put our data on scenicness together with this health data from the census? And what we found was that people who lived in areas rated as more scenic reported their health to be better. Now, we wondered, are there maybe some obvious explanations for this? Is it perhaps just about whether people live in the city or the country? Just, London versus the Lake District? But we found that that wasn't enough to explain the relationship. If we looked at just urban areas on its own, the relationship still held. We wondered about a few other explanations. Was it just money? Or was it perhaps pollution? But we found that neither of these two factors could explain the relationship we'd seen either. The final thing we wondered was whether we had perhaps just found a really complicated way of measuring how green areas were. Now, data from aerial photography confirms the Lake District is indeed very green, but there are other areas in England that score highly in terms of green space, but don't score so well in terms of scenic ratings. And our analyses showed us that to get the best possible explanations of how healthy people reported themselves to be, we really needed this new data on aesthetics. Now, I should be clear, we have a few more steps to take before we can make strong claims about causality. But if people really do feel healthier in more scenic locations, why might that be? Do people perhaps do more exercise? Or maybe, do they just feel happier, and that leaves them to feel healthier? Now, happiness is something which has traditionally been quite difficult to measure. And for this reason, we were delighted to start collaborating with George McCarran from the University of Sussex. Now, George had created an app called Mappiness. And if you install Mappiness, it pings you a couple of times a day, and it asks you how happy you feel. It also asks you a few other things, like who you're with and what you're doing. And so on the back of Mappiness, we have over 3 years of data of happiness measurements for over 15,000 people. Now, if you've got data of this size, you start seeing some patterns. So I'm happy to tell you all, you've only got to hang on one more day, and life is going to start looking a lot better. But at the same time, it looks like maybe I didn't pick the best month to give my talk. But these patterns aside, if we put the data from Mappiness and the data from Scenic or Not together, we start to be able to answer some questions that we would have really struggled to answer before. Specifically, are people really happier when they're in more scenic locations? And the answer is, yes, they are. Even if we take into account whether those areas are urban, suburban, or rural, whether they're natural or built up, and how green they are, as well as a bunch of other measurements of what activities people were doing and other things such as the weather. Now, we showed these results to planners, and we were delighted because they were really interested. But the first question they'd always ask us is, well, OK, so what actually makes a place scenic? And we were in this really frustrating situation because we loved the Scenic or Not data, but as humans, it was really difficult to go through those hundreds of thousands of photographs and come up with any sort of meaningful answer to this question. Now, thankfully, over the past few years, we've seen some real leaps in the ability of computers to understand what's in an image. And so instead of looking at all of these photographs ourselves, we started to feed them in to a deep neural network that had been trained by some researchers at MIT, which is called Places CNN. So if you give Places CNN photographs like this, then it will give you information on what location is depicted in the photograph. So here we see high scores, for example, for valley, or for lake, or for mountain. And it also tells you a bit about what features the scene has. And so from Places CNN, we got data on over 300 features for our 200,000 photographs. So with that data, we could finally start to ask, OK, so which features really lead people to rate locations as more scenic? Now, some of the things we found you might not be so surprised about. Turns out I'm not the only person who likes lakes. The same goes for valleys. But at the same time, we found photographs which included industrial areas were not doing so well, and indeed photographs that included buildings that Places CNN thought looked like hospitals. But once we dug into the data a little further, we started to see that, the pattern wasn't quite this simple. It's not just a case of scenic places are the natural places. In particular, if we consider data from urban built-up areas where most of us live, we start to see that buildings with character, such as cottages or castles, or bridge-like structures, such as viaducts or aqueducts, can improve the rating of a scene. And at the same time, we see that not all green space is the same. So trees lead to higher ratings of these photographs. But large areas of grass or athletic fields tend to bring those ratings down. Now, we were excited about the Scenic or Not data, but there was one drawback. We only had one measurement for every kilometre square in Great Britain. Now, Geograph, on the other hand, had loads more photographs, so we couldn't help but wonder, can we not train our neural net to rate the photographs itself? And the answer was yes, we could. So we took Places CNN, the CNN that we'd been working with before, and we took our Scenic or Not data, and we used the Scenic or Not data to fine-tune Places CNN so that instead of telling us what was in the photographs, it would start telling us how scenic it thought the photographs were. So this is an excerpt of a map of London that we generated using our newly trained Scenic CNN. So dots represent photographs from Geograph. Dots in blue are photographs that the Scenic CNN rated more highly. And dots in red are photographs that didn't get such a high score. So you see pretty quickly that our Scenic CNN really likes parks. And indeed, if we get the Scenic CNN to pick out its top 5% scenic locations in London, it does choose places like Hampstead Heath, which are beautiful and green. But in line with our previous results, it also chooses some built locations, such as Big Ben or the Tower of London. So overall, what we've seen from our results is that scenic locations are not simply green locations. At the same time, scenic places are not simply natural places. But perhaps most importantly, what we're starting to see is that scenic places might not just be a nice to have. They might actually have consequences for something as important to all of us as our health and our happiness. Thank you very much.